Hopefully that's not too distracting. Anyway, so this is my first video teaching you whatever. All this stuff is linked in the description if you want to skip through stuff, you know, all of it's laid out, whatever, check it out. For those of you who want the full video experience, I'll just kind of explain why do you need a song or a video telling you how to write a song. Like, what's the purpose? Why am I doing this, right? Why should you watch this video, or, you know, whatever. And basically I could just say that I've spent, basically if you just want to take one thing away from this video, then just, you can do whatever you want. Okay, you don't need someone to tell you how to write a song. Like, that's okay, you can click off now. But like, so aside from that, why am I making this video? Well, basically, I'm an artist, you know, I write songs. Now I'm at a point where I release a new EP every month. So I'm, you know, becoming a prolific artist, you could say, right? But, you know, I've been writing my first debut album for 10 years now this year. So I've spent tens of thousands of dollars going to music schools, you know, stuff like that. And like, while I don't regret those experiences, and I've learned so much from so many amazing people, there are many things that are not so savory that really set me back as an artist. And like, took many years to recover from, basically. So I'm making this video because I want to teach people the things that I wish someone else had taught me. And from my own standards, I don't feel like anyone really has taught me how to write a song, when that's primarily like my main concern. You know, I've gone to music schools and said, can you teach me how to write a song? And they're always like, yes, of course. But so it's not anyone I'm picking on in particular. It's just, I think the way that we teach music is not very effective for certain people, like including myself. So I want to basically be the thing, provide the lessons that I wish other people had taught me. So that's what I'm attempting to do with this video today. So this is my attempt at teaching you how to write a song. And because it's almost like a bicycle. Like, in a way, people kind of like expect you to teach yourself, and that's kind of why I got so frustrated. It's almost like if I'm trying to ride a bike, right, and that's my goal, then I have a bunch of people saying, well, here's all the options you can do. Here's training wheels. You can use training wheels. Here's the process step by step. But like, I know I can deal with training wheels. I want someone to show me the mechanics of how to ride a bike. Like what do I do? Do I move this foot? Like, do I put this foot there? Do I how do I steady myself? Like, what all the stuff like that I need to know. I don't need to know about training wheels. I already know about that. You know, it's very helpful. It's not that those things are wrong, but it's just not what I'm looking for specifically. And which a lot of people's concern for doing this is like, you have to be self-directed. So it's like, so I understand a lot of people, they don't want you to just, you know, it's like teaching someone how to speak, right? You don't want to tell people what to say, because that's up to you. Like, the way you speak is the way you speak. So, but my point is, I think there's a way we can teach people how to speak without telling them what to say. So that's my attempt to, that's what I'm doing with this video. This is my attempt at doing it. So, all that being said, let's get right into it, I guess. I think I kind of covered everything. I've got a list here. This is somewhat disorganized, but it should be good enough, at least in terms of presentation. So anyway, I've got a little list pulled up. Let's check it out. So very first thing, first of all, everything I'm saying here, these are all guidelines. You can do whatever you want. Like, you don't have to have someone tell you what you should or shouldn't do. You know, and so a great suggestion I've linked it in the description. Watch this. If you're only going to get one thing out of this video, then watch this TED Talk by Victor Wooten, and it's called Music as a Language. And basically, he makes the point that music is just literally another form of language, and that we teach it all wrong. He's like, how do you teach a baby to talk? Do you sit there and say, oh, you can't speak with me until you get good enough at speaking. Speak alone in your room on your own, and then once you're good, then you can speak with us. It's like, no, you're just always a part. You're always speaking. The way you speak is legitimate. You know, like when I was a kid, I used to say Bubba guy because I couldn't say butterfly, right? People didn't say, no, that's wrong. You can't say that. It was like, so then it turned into a joke. So now they're saying it my wrong way. Right, so Bubba guy, haha, it's funny. You know, so like, this is a great example. Victor Wooten goes off on this point. So that's, I feel like, a very motivational type of thing to realize, is that like, you probably already have the ability to make music within you, and it's just that, you know, you if you can feel the music, you got it. It's as simple as that. So watch that video first, That should give you enough confidence. If that doesn't give you enough confidence to just do the music, then I'll continue with other aspects or whatever, Blech. So, that being said, my whole point is that these are guidelines. This is a springboard that you can jump off of, as like a template. It's, yeah. But that being said, there's two camps I should inform you of before you go any further. If you're the type where you want to reinvent the wheel and you don't want anyone to influence you, then don't let anyone influence you. Like, stop watching the video. So, and I've known people like this. They refuse any formal training. They're entirely, as much as they can be, self-taught, and they're happy. So if you resonate with that, go with that. Just go for it. And you don't have to waste any more time, because I don't want you to, if that's what you really want, I don't want you to go through 10 years of training only to realize, wow, I really regret doing that, because I really don't want to be, whatever. There's arguments. I'm not going to argue which camp is better or worse. I don't know. It's up to you. I'm letting you decide, simply giving you some options, saying, here, check this out. This is a thing that some people do and they love it. So if you resonate with that, there you go. On the other hand, influence is a great thing, to the other camp. So I guess this video would go along with that. So I'm just letting you know, it's entirely, you could call it artistically naive, whatever you want to call it. That's a legitimate path to reinvent your own wheel. To the other camp, they might see that as wasting your time, right? It just depends. It's up to you. It's a perspective, right? So those are two options. Yeah, you want to resist all external influence and just do your own thing. That's cool. The other camp, the other side of the story, is taking as much on as you can, all that type of stuff, allowing yourself to be influenced and then modulating, that type of thing. So, I mentioned the Victor Wooten video, so I'm not going to tell you what to say. I'm simply showing you options, how you could phrase things, maybe structure sentences, help you convey your messages more clearly, or give you some ideas, that kind of thing. So, moving on. Right, so then you have almost like these two camps. One is you're entirely self-taught. The other one is, it's more formal, it's learning based. There's influence, it's structural. You're taking on things other people have done and kind of making it your own. You're basically influenced, the inspiration comes externally. So you're influenced by these external sources of inspiration. It's also possible to internally generate your own inspiration, or even to have external inspiration without other people being involved. So that's another option too. But also being said, everything I'm mentioning in this video, this is not an exhaustive list. I'm simply giving you the things I can think of right now. It's your job to be creative and come up with other options that I'm not even aware of. There I might present things as a binary. You could take a hybrid approach. So that's another thing. You can come up with even more ideas not listed here. So this is not an exhaustive list or tutorial. So, if you do want influence, if you're cool with that, here's an example. Look at the origins of popular music, like jazz. Perfect example of how did jazz happen. Basically, all these white dudes came up with this formal music system that they call music theory, and they're like, oh, cool, check out our music. And they showed it to black musicians, right? And then black musicians were open-minded and learned that and said, dude, this is cool. So then they learned it and then said, but let me put my spin on it. Let me do something, beef it up in a way that feels kind of sterile. Let me put my spin on it. So then they start doing their crazy thing, and you get like Robert Johnson, blues kind of stuff like that. And then, so then the white man is open-minded too, and he says, whoa, you made it better. That's cool. That's better than I could have done on my own. Now I need to get on your level. So then they learned, their ways, and then it just went back and forth like that. It's this, vicious circle or cycle. It's an upward spiral. So then they just influence each other, and then that's why jazz is so amazing. As an example, because so many different cultures and people have contributed to it, and were open-minded enough to allow each other to be influenced, so to a level where they could do better than they could have done alone. So that's the other perspective too. That's very valuable. And then you look at other genres, for a bad example, like rap, I don't know, whatever. And then it's if you see yourself as perfect, we don't need any influence, then it's never going to change. Consequently, it'll never improve. But if you see it as perfect, then you don't want it to improve. You don't want it to be changed. So that's two different ideas, two different camps. So like the origin of jazz, people are influencing each other in a positive feedback loop. So I see music as a cooperative situation. Cooperative, competitive, you can look at however you want. I choose a cooperative, whereas like everyone else's success is helping me be more successful, right? Like I'm into metal, for example. I'm glad all these Meshuggah gent people came along so that I didn't have to spend 10 years figuring out that I wanted that. I just have it now, and now I can just move on because other people already pioneered it, right? So that's kind of how I see things. I love it when people are more successful because they inspire me to be more successful, and it's easier. When I'm at the top, I'm kind of stagnating. I don't like that. I want to improve my stuff. So anyway, that's another example. Getting creative. You're taking old building blocks, experimenting, using stuff in a new way. Another great example, if using a guitar, for guitar example, instead of a plectrum, a pick, you could use a comb, right? There's a Mattias, there's a guy who I got that idea from. But like that's a perfect example. Experiment, like use a comb as a plectrum. That's crazy. You can experiment, do whatever you want. You can take building blocks other people have made, society has crafted without you, and just adopt that and make it your own. So that's a cool thing. So we're getting to the song. I'm just listing off some things I think are important. But anyway, so if you're still having issues with this kind of stuff, get bored. Allow yourself to get bored. Boredom is good when it drives you to do things that bring you life. Boredom that just makes you want to do nothing, that's not good. Okay, but you want a boredom that agitates you, that drives you, makes you go do interesting stuff. Just let yourself get bored, and then just let that creativity happen, flow from that. That's very important. Let boredom drive you. Get bored, experiment. Okay, another point. A great rule of thumb is that if it sounds good, then it's good, okay? If it sounds good, then it sounds good. It doesn't matter if it breaks a rule. If it sounds better, if something you're doing makes it sound better, then do it, because that's all that matters. You want it to sound good, right? So sometimes breaking these general rules makes it sound better, like using extreme mixing techniques, for example. Like I might only want to duck something 2 decibels, but like taking this giant surgical cut sometimes makes it sound better. So it's really go by that. So don't be afraid to be unconventional or weird or break rules if it improves the sound. As an example, the Beatles did a lot of experimental stuff that ended up being groundbreaking. Another example, Miles Davis's Bitches Brew album was like the first to use copy and pasted tape, and it was highly criticized at the time, but it's now considered a very highly influential album and important. So there's that whole thing. On the other hand, be aware it's possible to have a bad ear. Okay, as an audio engineer, you see this all the time. Ask any audio engineer. And they will tell you that many of their clients genuinely believe that the bad audio that they want sounds good. So if you want an example of this, check out Metallica's And Justice for All with no bass on it. They actually thought that sounded great. Okay, so it's possible you might just have a bad ear. Okay, you might not be able to even hear what you're dealing with, and that's a common issue. So just be aware of that. So it's a rule of thumb. Sometimes the mixing or mastering or audio engineer guy knows something more. There's always people who know more than we do. That's cool. So anyway, just so be aware of that. If it sounds good, then it sounds good, but at the same time, be aware that you might be missing stuff as well. So that's another option. And then as another example, like most people can't even pick out the bass in a song. So there's the perfect example. So how are you going to tell me what a good bass sounds like if you can't even hear the bass? That's a perfect example. So just something to be aware of. Yeah, so beware in assuming you can pick stuff out or judge the quality better than you actually can. So that's a good thing. Even if you have good ears. Here's another thing. The entire point of mastering, for example, is to send that track to someone else who isn't you because they haven't heard it a billion times like you have. So it gives you a fresh perspective on the song that you can't get alone. So there's another example. So things to consider. One more thing to mention before the main songwriting tutorial begins, okay? What's the point of doing this if all this stuff and if you're just gonna give up? If you're just gonna give up, then what's the point of wasting all this time? So let's make sure we're not wasting our time here. Let's clarify why we're making art in the first place. This doesn't take very long, frankly. But energy management. So what's the point of teaching you if you won't even do it or will give up? Okay, self-motivation. How do you self-motivate? Most people I know have given up music. They're done. They were so passionate, and then boop, now it's just nothing. They don't care, gave up, whatever, okay? Most people I know have given up. So I'm telling you, this is an issue. Don't think it can't happen to you. So let's address it. Okay, I'm a bit out of order here. Okay, anyway, so one thing you can think about is how you're writing. Well, let's do one way to self-motivate. Are you results oriented or process oriented? So let me tell you, I used to be results oriented. If you're results oriented, you're basically trying to get through everything. You're trying to get to the big moment, which is the song is done, right? So if that's all you can think about, you're not going to enjoy it. The whole thing's going to suck, right? If all you want to do when climbing, this is good general life advice too. If you're trying to climb a mountain and all you want to do is get to the peak, then 99% of the time it's going to suck, and then you're going to have this tiny little blip of euphoria, and then you'll crash afterwards and feel terrible. So it's like most of it is just terrible, right? Well, what if there's another way of looking at it? What if you can enjoy the process but not be attached to the results or the outcome? What if it doesn't matter how the outcome, it's just the sheer joy of doing the thing? I argue this is a very motivating frame, because if the other way is just like a salmon swimming upstream. It's constant resistance, and you don't even like it, you know? So, because it's hard, you're just trying to get through everything. If you're just trying to get through life, you're just basically trying to die. So like my whole point is learn to associate the process itself with the enjoyment that you're looking for. So that way, you're always going to want to keep doing it. And then the second you're done with a track, you want to start another one immediately, because it's the whole process is what's fun. From beginning to end, the songwriting, coming up with the idea, arranging it, blah, 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 releasing, blah, blah, all of it is fun. And it stops being fun once you stop doing it. So like that's where the position I'm in now. Now I get upset after I release, because now I'm just like, well, now it's over. The game's over. I won. I released it. Now I'm bored again. Like, this sucks. So get started immediately. Jump into a new one. My camera's making some really weird things. I'll just do a new clip. Yeah, so two common motivation issues you may have. Either never getting started at all or doing anything because the hardest part is getting started, or starting a million projects and never finishing anything. I've actually had both of these issues before. How to solve it. First part, you never get started. You can't ever get started. You're going to want to think about dominoes, right? All you got to do is push one domino, take that first step, and the rest will follow. The hardest thing is that first step, so that's all you got to worry about. So quit acting like you have to scale the whole mountain. Realize all you have to do is take a step, and you're done. And it'll all flow. So that's what I did. I almost got a tattoo of a domino on my hand just to remind me. So then when you shrink it down like that, that's pretty manageable. I can take one step, then it all flows from there, make it easy. So then another way is make the first step easier, and it just gets easier. So then that's not a problem. So if that's your issue, then do that. The other side of it is if you're constantly coming up with stuff, but you just don't finish anything. You got to realize finishing songs is also a skill. It's a part of the process, and that's something very important. And there may be a lot of resistance towards finishing because you don't want to face all this potential discomfort, like, oh my God, I hate this. Why did I spend all this time? And whatever. You got to do it. You got to take those lessons and feel the consequences and learn from that and recalibrate. It's important. So that being said, yeah, never following through, you want to follow through. That's important. So work on the skill of finishing the song. So that's another thing. So anyway, meaning. Why are you doing this? What's the point, right? Why are you even doing this? What does all of this mean to you? Why are you, so a great example, now the artificial intelligence whatever, which is a kind of general name for so many different things, it's an umbrella term. But basically now machines can make music that's not bad, it's pretty decent, but then, personally, I just listen to this and I'm like, it just feels soulless, like lifeless, So, and then if you relate to that, ask yourself, why does this randomly generated music not really speak to me? I mean, it sounds good, objectively, but like, it doesn't really speak to me personally. I don't resonate with it. Why? What's the deal with that? Where's the soul in the music, for example? So like, what's your personal meaning? Like, what distinguishes us from robots making music? Like, what, just mechanically doing all the parts? Like, is there some kind of like spirit or soul, or for lack of a better term, like what's the energy you're using, like that you're providing, that you're getting out of it? That's one thing to consider. Yeah, just clarify why you're making art in the first place. Like, just think for a minute about that. Be open-minded. Just sit there in that open space and think about it if you're not aware. So, once you clarify this, you can fulfill your purpose more effectively. Honestly, I know a lot of people, the only reason they're making music is because they want to get girls. Or they want to get famous. Or they want to make money. And I'm telling you right now, there are a million more effective ways to do that than making music. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. You don't have to waste all this time if all you're trying to do is get girls. Work on your insecurities. You know, retract, don't pursue. You know, deal with any trauma you may have, etc. Like, that's personal work. That can help you find a partner or whatever, right? So you don't have to waste all this time making music or dealing with other people who want to make music, right? Or if you just want to get famous, there's a billion more ways. That maybe just go the pop playbook and follow it to a T. You don't care about personal expression because you're trying to get famous. See what I'm saying? Clarify what you want. If all you want to do is make music, like me, and you want to make it as good as you can, and that's all you care about, nothing else matters, well then focus on that. But if you're not clear about what you're trying to do, you're not going to get there. Or at least it's, you're a ship, you don't have a destination. How are you just going to end up in a good spot? You're just like floating around everywhere, so have your destination and then you can move and get there. So if that is your situation, don't be surprised if you only get male attention. What's up, bro? Sick cab, man. What kind of guitar is that? So this is related to clarifying why you're making music. Having artistic integrity, if this applies to you, being artistic is so for example, you can make art mechanically as like a job or a chore for someone and not enjoy it at all. That's legitimate too. You can do whatever you want. This is what I'm saying, giving you options. But also, you can make art for its own sake. And I would argue making art for its own sake produces a better product. Maybe you don't care about the product quality. Doesn't matter, right? It's up to you. But like I'm saying, if you do want to make the music as good as possible, try making the art for its own sake. And I even say there's a way, surely, to make music as a job or as a chore or commission for someone else, while simultaneously making it within the frame of for its own sake so that it ends up being a good product. So those are some different options you can think about. Yeah. So, getting into the music. Let's do it. Let's get into it. Now we're going to talk about step by step how to write the song. Let's do it. Okay. So first we're going to do pre-writing. So, unless you're Bach and you can just come up with stuff immediately, come up with entire compositions in your head out of nothing, assuming you can't do that yet. I'm not at that level. But, assuming you're not just inspired, just starting at ground zero, nothing. So what do? Pre-writing. You get ideas, you get inspiration, you can start with your personal feelings and emotion. Like Rick Graham says, you don't have to be smart or clever to write music, you can just start with feeling or emotion. So that's another option too. So start with feelings, maybe you just come up with a cool title. Maybe you'll come up with a really nice concept you could turn into like a concept, maybe not album, but work or concept thing, based on the concept. Or you could make it for its own sake. I'll give you two ideas, two different ways of structuring music. You can have a top-down or a bottom-up approach. The bottom-up approach is you let the song just naturally turn into what it is and become its own thing, right? So it's very easy to write the song. But personally, I find under that context, it's harder to name the song and do all the later stuff with that, because the first part's so easy. You're just improvising. It's like, okay, what do I call this Frankenstein thing that just appeared, So then the other side is top-down. Top-down approach is you start with an idea, you know what you want to do, and then you try and make music that lives up to that idea. Personally, that's a lot harder for me. It takes a lot longer because for so long I was developing my skills and I couldn't do stuff that I even liked, so it would take me forever. So that's one option. Right now it's relatively easy for me. I can do it pretty easily. It's not, so all these are skills you can develop, is my point. But that's the other thing, top-down approach. So, and there's pros and cons to each, and, there's two different ways of writing music. So that's really cool. And then getting ideas, things like that. Like, where do you get ideas from? And look all around you. This is getting creative. You can get inspired by non-musical things. Like Tosin Abasi mentions, inspirations everywhere. Cars inspire him. Like anything you want. Sci-fi books, whatever you want. or just use your imagination, or tap into that, do whatever you want. So those are just getting some ideas. If you're going to use an idea, those are some different things to think about. So, and then of course we're going to revisit this later, but just tying into this, if you do have a concept or something, if you release this under a band name or a project thing or whatever, like, you would want that to be related to that in some way, right? So I mean, that's another thing to think about if relevant, like how you're going to release this if you decide to publish it or whatever, So like under what name, if that concept is that. So all of this songwriting concept stuff may be, if you're doing that, may be related to the project that you're doing that's releasing all of this stuff. So that's another thing to think about, how and if it connects to the actual band name or band concept or whatever. So that's another thing. Another interesting point to make. You have a monopoly. We're all individual people, so you have a monopoly on your brand of uniqueness, because there's only one. So if you capitalize on that, no one can take that from you, because there's only one you, and there will only ever be one you. And then on top of that, no one can do you better than you can. So it's like, all people can do is imitate you and be inspired by that. So anyway, so that's another thing. If you can, tap into a your personal uniqueness that makes you unique from other people, and that's very valuable. So I recommend tapping into that. So could start with structures. I might just tell you how to come up with, let's coming up with rhythms and melodies first, and then we'll get into structures. So first I should mention, rhythm is fundamental. Like, if you're literally speaking, like, there can be no melody without rhythm, okay? But you can have rhythm without melody, but you can't have melody without rhythm. So just understand, rhythm is technically fundamental to everything, okay? So it's not just the notes that matter, it's the space between the notes that is just as important. Some argue it's even more important than the notes themselves. So anyway, which I might agree with. But anyway, so that's another option. So if you really look at it like chords and melodies, if you zoom in like a lot, it's technically just a rhythmic polyrhythm. It's insane. So anyway, like, I believe Adam Neely went hardcore on that. So if you want to look into that, check him out. But anyway, so rhythm. How do you come up with rhythm? I'll give you one great idea that I use to come up with rhythm. Is I just use literally randomness as inspiration. So I'll see birds sitting on a power line, and it'll be like 2, 3, 4. So I'll go dun dun da da dum, 2, 3, 4. Let's do 2, 3, 1. So I'll go dun dun da da dum dun. And then there'll be my rhythm. And then I'll polyrhythmically add that against a 4/4 backbeat with snare on 3. So what was it, like 1? No, it was 2, 3, 1. It's like dun 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 dun. So like, there's an example. Just use random information. Take some sticks, throw them around. Ruffle up, some fabric, and then count the fabric ripples. And then turn that into a riff. Or you can just, anything random works like that. Or you can just make up the rules. Look at a power outlet, count the sides. Like, oh, there's 4 sides, that's 4. Then you have 3 little prong things, there's 3. There's 4, 3. And then if you have a sequence, you can just, like, I forget what it's called, do permutations, so just swap them around. So 2, 3, 1 was cool. Let's try 3, 2, 1. Let's try 3, 3, 2. So then you can modify that endlessly. So here's a bunch of examples how you can just come up with rhythms if you want. And that's just polyrhythmic. So I mean, you can do whatever you want. So there's a bunch of different ways to come up with rhythms. Random inspiration. Another thing, in transposing is huge. So a great example is, you can take an instrument, like every instrument has a different layout, so the notes that are easier to play or are more drawn to are different for each instrument. So that means each instrument generally has a sound to it. So a great way to get a different sound, for example, if you want to play guitar and you want your guitar to sound like a saxophone, then listen to saxophone music, transpose the saxophone notes and play that. Or another thing I do personally is, I'll come up with rhythms vocally with my mouth. So I'll just go dun 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 dun, or I'll come up with a melody, do 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 do, and then I'll take that and transpose that to the guitar. So that's another way you can get inspiration, is if you just take something from one instrument and sort of make it sound like, transpose the different notes, right? So that's another option. Transposing is huge from other instruments, the voice, etc. So melodies, how do you come up with melodies? That's a great question. I'm still learning how to do that myself personally, but like, just I've just started paying attention to like music that I pay attention to melodies now, and I sing it myself, and then realize, oh, that's cool. Because if you just kind of like say like do do with no endpoint in mind, just go do 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 do, then it just seems almost kind of arbitrary. Whereas if I just continuously talk and then don't ever take a break and then just blah 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 like a flow stream of consciousness and blah, it just feels kind of jumbled, like it's not intentional. So maybe be more intentional about what I'm saying, musically speaking, right? So like, bum ba da dum, bum bum bum, ba da ba da ba da dum, bum 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 ba da. So that's another thing to think about. Try to use it speaking, be kind of intentional with it. Or you can just do, if you're going for random, you can go for random on purpose. You see what I'm saying? Everything just depends on what you're going for. You can make it sound monotonous and repetitive and random if you want to. That's, some people like that. Under certain contexts, that's good. Other contexts, you want it to be more like that. So another thing to think about. So I can't really help with melodies, I guess. I'm still learning that myself. But just, those are some inspiration ideas. Listen to birds. They have interesting melodies. Just sit there and like test different things, like do 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 do, and just see, go by feel and see what you like. So do you like longer phrases, or do you like shorter and longer together? I mean, you just kind of figure all this stuff out. You come up with different melodies type of deal. You can even play it randomly and then just figure out what works. Go, I like that, and just kind of accumulate all these things so that you figure out what you like, so you can make stuff that you really enjoy. That's kind of the whole point. I don't know what you enjoy, and everyone enjoys stuff differently. So figuring that out is incredibly important, and that's part of your personal journey. So then, anyway, but you don't even need a melody. Let's just say you have rhythm. Okay, so now you got your rhythm thing. How do you structure all? Now you can come up with riffs and melodies, whatever. How do you structure all this together? How do you put it all together? Well, once again, you can do whatever you want. So that structuring is a beautiful art, because like it's really interesting to me personally how I'll even take certain songs just to analyze the structure. How do they do this? And you have different parts of structure, like you have a chorus, which is a big moment you repeat or something. Then you have like a bridge or whatever. I'm not very familiar with all the terms that leads up to it. Then you have a solo part. I mean, you have an intro and an outro. So there's like well-known things like that, like structural devices, you could say, that you can combine those however you want. But so structures, I'm just going to give you a bunch of options of what you could do as in terms of structure. At the most basic, a cappella. Just this. Here's your song. Blah 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 da da da. Assume I'm singing lyrics. Da 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 da. And then there's your song. Like, you don't even have to do anything. You could literally write a song right now, just like that, and boom, you've got your first song. Like, it's that simple if you want it to be. Okay, so and then there's another guy, I can't remember his name. Frank Zappa like promoted him, and he had a song called Merry Go Round, I think. Very short song. Like, he would just do these short songs like he's a little jukebox or something. You put a quarter in and he'll just give you like a short little bop song that he made. So that's legitimate. You can do that if that's what you're going for. So a cappella, structuring. You can make songs alone versus with other people. It's kind of different. When you're alone, it's all self-directed. You do everything. You're the mastermind behind it all. You're like God, Not really, but you know what I mean, right? You're organizing everything and you're in complete control, and there's no other like influence, right? When you're working with other people, it's different. You can come up with stuff as a band. You can shoot ideas back and forth while you're all doing your individual thing. That's common too. So there's another aspect of it as well. Those are two different options that, the structures can be a little different. When you're working with a group, maybe it's an idea to try several different things and just see what works for you as a band, or why not just try multiple things and use that to come up with different songs from different origins. That's another option. So, but just worth mentioning, personally, this might not apply to you at all, but it's possible that you can become dependent on others to make music, and that's something to be aware of, right? So if I'm completely dependent on other people, then that means if they decide they don't want to do X, Y, Z or whatever, I'm screwed. Now I can't make music. So that's another thing. maybe don't be dependent on others when it comes to music. Like, it's important to be able to make music, as an artist or musician, or, to be able to do it. Say everyone you're working with just says, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, are you just going to give up making the music that you like? Screw that. So being dependent on people may be something to avoid. At the same time, cooperating with people, you can come up with amazing ideas when it's 3 people working on something together and shooting ideas back and forth. You can come up with crazy stuff. It's an amazing experience. I recommend it. But just 2 things to think about. A couple things. Another thing. So you can try composing from different starting points. So first off, unless you're Bach, which I assume you're not, and you don't have to have a starting point. You can just come up with the song in your head and rearrange an entire thing and just poof, here's the song. That's self-explanatory. Okay, so aside from that, you could start with lyrics, for example. Write all the lyrics, right? So that maybe you'd have your concept of the song prepared first. You start with lyrics, then you write music to match that. You could start instrumentally. So you don't even have to have lyrics at all. The opposite of a cappella, it's only instruments, so there aren't any lyrics. Or you could add a human voice, but non-lyrically, so just use the voice as an instrument. La da 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 da. Or do scatting. That's another option. Nonsense words. So you could start instrumentally. If you're starting instrumentally, you can split that and say you can start with a rhythm, and then add melodies and stuff on top, add lyrics, or you can start with the lead or the melody and then add a rhythm. Or you could do either one of those and just add vocals to it. See what I'm saying? So there's different starting points you can take to flesh out the song. So those are some options you could do. You could compose from different starting points. Another thing, you can compose in segments, or you can compose as a whole. So you could record, have what you want to do in your head and record the entire rhythm track, and then record the lead track over it entirely, and then record the entire vocals. I'll mention this can be a very demotivating process style for some people because you can't really anticipate what it's actually going to sound like until after it's done and you've done everything, and that can be kind of difficult, especially for people who struggle to self-motivate. So one potential solution to that is you can go segment by segment. So just start with one segment, construct, have the first riff you have, your chorus. So then you come up with everything, you're within 10 minutes, a short amount of time, you can come up with your vocals, your rhythm, your bass, your everything. So then you have an entire song just as a segment. So you know what the final thing's going to sound like, and then you can go from there and work with other segments, and then just add more segments, and then build it up as you go. That's another option. Personally, I find that very fun and effective way to make music. But so those are 2 things to think about. Another option, you can plan all of this. You can rehearse it in your head and just do retakes and retake, tweak it, make it perfect, or you could just improvise. You don't have to do anything. So just record, play it, and record. Now you're done. There's your song. So that's another option too. That's another skill on its own, is improvising and coming up with stuff on the fly, bloop, 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 and not having time to think about it really, unless you're a super fast brain person. So, but you know what I mean. So anyway. Okay, so another option you could have, if you have a bunch of segments, you could have the song very dynamic structurally. So it's changing, there's lots of variation. You don't have to do that either. You could just go for drone, monotonous, continuous. Maybe you want the person to think the record's broken. You're just is just doing the same thing over and over for an hour? You can do that if you want. So that's another option. You don't have to make it be interesting. Maybe you're trying to go for a boredom feel. So then on the other side of it, if you want it to be more interesting, they've proven that if you put a gap into a song, it makes the song perceived as being better. So even if it's an annoying gap, even if it's an obnoxious ad saying, hey, $24.99, blah blah blah, it's back to the song. If that happens, you will like the song more. So this is the thing, crazy, right? So you don't have to put an annoying ad into your song, which would be kind of funny. Or a fake ad, that would be funny. But you can just add little gaps. So, but the point is, why does this happen? Your brain gets used to anything that's happening. Homeostasis. You can't just stay in an altered state forever. Your brain brings you back to normal. Right? So then if you just have the same chord, da 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 da, at first it's like cool, but then you get used to it, and then you just like da 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 da. So then it kind of loses its flair. It's like you get used to it. All you gotta do is add a break, and you're going da 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 da. Da, 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 da. Yeah, just add that little break can make a huge difference, or change it up. So like that's another option. You can have a dynamic structure that keeps it more interesting, or you can go completely monotonous and just have it banging your head against the wall for 30 minutes, which kind of fun, not gonna lie. But anyway, you can also do you can do super complicated chords like giant steps, like crazy, or you can just do this drone monotonous, which I feel like I kind of already said this or whatever, but no, I'm sorry. You could use one chord only. There was a popular song, I believe it's by Ariana Grande, I think, where very popular song where the entire song is just one chord. So they're like blah 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 da blah blah da blah blah da da. So and just one chord. So you don't even have to go crazy with all these complicated chords. You can just find one chord that sounds cool, make that your whole song. So there's another option. Another option, more on the droney side. You don't have to do things be discreet, very obvious what's going. You can do an atmospheric, minimalist, ambiance type of thing. Very subtle, very subtle changes over time. Very minimal type of thing. Just like a synth. Just kind of slowly changes where you're just kind of like, oh, nice background ambiance. So that's an option. Or you can do maximalist, wall of sound. Have as much stuff as possible. Which, once again, if you're going to do that, I remind you that your brain might get used to that. So that's another thing to think about. Unless you don't care, too. That's another thing. So that's another option. So I believe I've covered everything on that. So you've got your song structured roughly how you want. Okay. Another thing to think about is what is like the style of your studio? Like what equipment are you using? What technology? Like what are you doing all of this on? That's the question. Are you just doing this in your head? You can, if that's, pretty hard. If you can do that, I don't think you need to watch this video. But anyway, yeah, you could either have a piece of paper, just old school, like write down this part, and then maybe give each section a name or something. This part's called Steve. Then we'll play Steve twice, and then we'll go back to the light bulb riff, whatever. Make up your own language. You could just have it all written on paper. Personally, I find that kind of difficult compared to other things. Or you could have a DAW, a digital audio workstation. So you have like some huge ones are like Reaper, Ableton, Fruity Loops, which I think that's the old name. FL Studio, I think that's what it's called. And then you have GarageBand, you've got Pro Tools, so there's a bunch of, you've even got like a really like cheaper apps, that you can download on a phone. So so there's all kinds of DAWs out there. That's the whole thing. And then also you've got analog DAWs. So you might have like an actual physical structure as like a mixing console or something, or buy some kind of little interface or something that you can play all the different tracks on and mix the levels right and everything, whatever. That's another option. The way I do it currently is I'm improvising everything. So some songs I might kind of pre-structure it to a degree, but once I hit record, I play all of it, then hit done, and then that's the recording. Yeah, so because I'm doing everything improvisationally, it's not as important for me to have everything be like perfect pre-planned, because a lot of stuff happens I don't prepare for. So you might not, what I'm trying to say is under this context, you might not really have much of a studio, so to speak. It's not really much. You don't need to keep, under an improvisational context, you don't need to keep track of everything. You might just have pen and paper, but then it's very flexible. So that's another option, is how flexible that's going to be. And of course, whatever equipment you have is going to influence your style too. For example, if you have a DAW, like if I'm mixing in GarageBand, or if I'm making music in GarageBand, I can just record something direct, my instrument plugged into the computer, and record a segment, and then listen to it. Oh, that's cool. And then just modify it, copy and paste it. I can put it in different parts, save it for later, use it wherever I want. So there's a lot of freedom where you can move it and do whatever you want. Pen and paper, that's not as fast, at least. So, but there's just a couple things to think about. Like the method that you're using to keep track of and organize all this information. Like your studio, like what kind of style is your studio doing, you know? So that's another thing to think about. Or you can meticulously plan everything and have it planned out and have pre-planned songs, have all your lyrics, have applicable chords or whatever need be, have it all laid out. So that's another thing to think about. So let's move on to lyrics. I haven't mentioned that yet. This is assuming lyrics are applicable. You might do instrumental left. But if you're doing lyrics, you can have nonsensical lyrics. So you can do, you don't even have to have lyrics at all, like I mentioned. You can just do human voice as an instrument. Or you can, if you're doing lyrics, you can have scat singing. So like they're not, it doesn't scuba doo bee ba ba doo ba ba la ba ba bow, you know. So that's an option. You don't even have to come up with lyrics like conventionally that mean anything, words that mean anything. So they could be nonsensical. You could, you know, improvise it, the scatting, or you could, you know, pre-plan it. So I'm gonna say doo-ba-la-ba-da, you know, whatever you want to do. So there's nonsensical or stream of consciousness. You could come up with actual lyrics, stream of consciousness. I do that sometimes with the improvising songs I do. Like I'll literally just come up with it in my head as I'm playing, and then hope I can remember it after I'm done recording, which sometimes I don't. So that's another option. You can do that. Or of course there's bottom up. You can, you know, sit there and plan everything you're going to say, have context, or, you know, have concepts, you know, things that is meaningful to you in some way, which, you know, you could make it more obscure of what you're trying to say. You could make it poetic and creative or metaphorical. You could also just say it literally. Here's what I think, blah, blah, blah. So do whatever you want. So there's a bunch of different options. Literary devices. You know, we've all heard of rhyme, lime, dime, mime, you know. So rhyming, but where are you rhyming? So you can expand that. So do you only rhyme at the end of every line? Or you can do internal rhyme. You can rhyme multiple things, or you can, you know, structure the rhyme so you have like A, B, A, B, A, A, B, B, A, A, B. I believe that's like a bluesy thing. So anyway, like, so there's, that ties into structure where you can structure the lyrics. Like there's a structure to the lyrics as well that you can play around with. That's pretty fun. So you can also look up literary devices, and that will give you a bunch of ideas more from literature on how to structure lyrics, because you can see lyrics as literature. So like any literary device, you know, onomatopoeia, I mean, you know, there's all kinds of things, you know, that you can find elsewhere about, you know, different literary devices you can use. So you know, so literary devices are great to use with that. So I believe that's pretty solid. We've covered most of this. Okay, another interesting point about lyrics. Technically, like everything you say has a rhythm. So, you know, you can technically find a rhythm, you know, in any rhythm, because it is rhythm because it's already there. So like anything that I'm saying with my words, like it inherently has a rhythm to it. So in terms of structuring the rhythm of your lyrics, you can either just use the natural rhythm of a lyric. For example, say, I went outside today. So, I went outside today, you know, dun 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 da da. So, or you could take lyrics, you know, you could have like a predetermined rhythm and then force your lyrics to be, you know, in the same rhythm as whatever you're writing it to. So you can, you know, or you can just take your lyrical idea and just force the rhythm of the instrumental and the music to match that rhythm of the song. So I just want to throw that in there and say that's another option you have, is that you can make the lyrics match the music rhythmically, or you can make the music match the lyrics rhythmically. So band names or project names or artist names or whatever. If applicable, how are you going to release, like who are you going to release this under? Like what's the entity that claims ownership of this song, right? So you could just use your own name, release stuff under your own name. This is just like me, Austin Killingsworth, making a song by Austin Killingsworth. Or you could come up with a project name or like a band name or an artist's name. You know, maybe it has some concept relevant to what you're doing. Maybe it doesn't matter at all and you're just trying to release whatever you want and like not have it really be like that, whatever, that's cool. Or, you know, if you're working with other people, obviously you're going to like want to work with them and come up with like a band name. Or if you're working alone, you have complete control over that, so you can just name. So that's another thing. Like think about whatever project or name or entity that owns this, that you're releasing this under or whatever. So, you know, which you could say maybe your brand, right? So that's another synonym. So like, so who's responsible for? So that's another thing to think about, as opposed to like just releasing audio. Well, who owns it? Like, you know, like, so yeah. And like I said, if applicable, alternatively, you could just do anonymous release into the public domain. I mean, do whatever you want. Now, yes, cover art. I don't really know of music that isn't associated with some kind of like cover art or visual thing. So, I mean, it's possible. I mean, so if that's what you're doing, you don't care, that's fine, not applicable. But how do you come up with cover art? So, like, what are you going to do with that? So, that's another thing to think about. That's just more of a visual standpoint. You can take your own photos, you know, and they don't have to be crazy high quality super camera. You can just take a really, you know, low quality picture with your phone and then just, you know, put it in MS Paint and then blow it up to like the proper size if you need to. I've done that many times. But uh-oh, that's not good. Anyway, so you can do that, or you can commission other people to make it for you. That's another thing. Do like a work for hire agreement. So like you just do some short payment or something, or they can do it for free if they're super awesome and you're like that with them. You have a great relationship, whatever. So there's a bunch of options for cover art. I could go into that in more depth, but I don't feel like that's really as applicable for this video. But so anyway, cover art. Covered all that. So I think we've covered pretty much most of the song making process in terms of the actual content of the song itself. Yes, so now I want to move into a very important point, which may be quite boring to you, and I understand that, but copyright. So okay, why do I got it? Okay, so all this being said, like, first and foremost, like, come up with your own stuff, okay? Like, come up with your own ideas so that way you own it. This is called your intellectual property. So if you come up with an idea, or, you know, a song, that song is yours. Like, you have a right to control how that song, like how other people interact with that, because it's your property. It's intellectual property. So it's an idea that you own because you came up with it. So because you own it, you get to control how that thing exists in the world and like the way people interact with it. So obviously don't use other people's intellectual property without their permission unless they grant it to you, you know, of course. Or, you know, there's some instances where you can, you know, there's many different types of like copyright thing. You know, some people, like I do this with many of my songs, I make it so that you can use many parts of my music, even for commercial purposes. So you can actually take my song, just adjust the EQ, and then re-upload it and make money off of it, and I'd be okay with that, as long as you give credit to the original source. Okay, so like that's one option you can do. Or you could just do public domain, like you release all rights to it and just say this is free, do whatever you want with it. It's no longer just mine. It's like the equivalent of Mickey Mouse, which I believe Mickey Mouse is in the public domain now, or at least the most earliest versions of him are, I think. So not the point, but just as an example. So you could make it public domain too. So there's many different options as a creator of how you want to structure your work. But that being said, other people's intellectual property is theirs. So unless they've given you explicit permission to do that, I'd be very careful about using that. Because it's risky. Maybe if you're only making, so this is where sampling comes in. A lot of people will sample songs or things they like and put it in their track. You know, which if you're just making this for yourself and your buddies, like, maybe you could get away with it and it'd be fine. But if you're trying to publish this and say this is mine, like, you might run into some legal issues. And at the very worst, you can get sued and have this huge issue. Like, you could just avoid all of that, you know. So that being said, if you have your own intellectual property, you can even get royalties from that. So people can actually pay you to use that if that's the way you've set up, you know, your own thing. So, and of course, I understand many of this copyright stuff is debatable and kind of controversial. Like, I believe they haven't really changed copyright law in like 70 years or something like that. Crazy. So, but I'm not here to debate like what should or shouldn't be done with the law and all that. Like, I'm just simply making the point, this is how it is. It's 2024. This is how it is now. So just be aware of that. To be aware that, you know, using other people's could compromise your art. You know, so just be aware of all this stuff. You know, that's very, very important. Also, so say you're done with something, if you want to just do amateur and just release it and you don't care, like me, cool, you know. But at the same time, if you're trying to be like legitimate with it, you could go to copyrights.gov, and there I believe you can you pay a fee, and then you can actually register your work with the Copyright Office, so it gets officially recognized that you made this. And if that has happened and you run into some dispute in the future, it makes it so easy to defend yourself with your intellectual property, you know, if you run into issues with other people misusing it or whatever, because you registered it. It's already official and very clear that it's yours. So that's a whole other thing. Maybe once I release my albums, I'll do that with them. But and also you might get pros involved. PRO. This is performing rights organizations, and these basically are organizations that will help enforce the protection of your property. So like they'll actually help you deal with copyright disputes as far as I know. Okay, this is my understanding of it. So. And they can help give you royalties for your music. So, and there's pros and cons to different PROs and which one you would want to join. I believe you can only join one. So, just another thing to be aware of. You know, there's pros and cons for each one. You know, that's another topic. But yeah. So then remixing samples. Make sure to not run into trouble. You know, there's like certain workarounds like parody. If you're making a parody, I believe that you can kind of do that. Once again, I'm not giving you legal advice. You know, this is just stuff to be aware of and to think about. But so like there's certain instances like parodies where you can get away with it because you're obviously like taking a thing and like turning it into a joke or something. So it's like there's like fair comment or criticism. Like so there's things you can do like that. But if you're trying to like take someone's copyright thing that they've reserved that right for and pass it off as your own, kind of dicey. You might run into some trouble. So just be aware of that. All right, one more important point. Preventing potential disputes. So I'll give you an example. Worst case scenario. What happens? You're writing a song. You're hanging out with your buddies. You come up with literally write everything by yourself, 99% of everything. The other person contributes 1%, and then the other person in the room isn't doing anything. So afterwards, you release everything. Well, afterwards, everyone changes their mind and decides, no, I contributed to this, so I deserve the credit for it. So now, worst case scenario, you have you and your previous friends suing each other into poverty, where everyone loses. That's not fun. Avoid this situation. And this really does happen. So don't think it couldn't ever happen to you, okay? So just saying, one very important thing you can do is clarify everyone's expectations beforehand. So that way you don't have this situation. Because like a lot of times what happens is like the courts will say, unless it was established beforehand, the courts will just give everyone roughly 50-50. So under that situation, they might say, okay, Austin, you only own 33%, while they own 30, the other guy owns 33, and the other guy owns 33. So like, you want to avoid a situation like that, right? So you want to give proper credit where the proper credit is due. So one way of avoiding that is writing a contract. Now, you don't have to make, I know contracts have an association of being ways people can manipulate each other. Don't think about it like that. Contracts are simply a way where you can clarify everybody's expectations within a group and make sure you're all on the same page. That's very useful and important. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You can just like write it on a napkin. That's a legal document. Okay, so like so that's another option. If you are working with people, be very clear about how much you're all contributing. You each are contributing to that project, and be on the same page about all of that, because you want to avoid potential disputes of like, well, I contributed more than you claim, and like have all these like litigation issues. You don't have to deal with that, okay? So all that can be avoided by simply writing a contract. There's one example. I've had a video or a movie I made that only exists because I made one of the actors sign a contract beforehand, because in the middle of it, this actor decided that they don't want to deal with it anymore, and they tried to abandon the project, which would have ruined the whole video. And that didn't happen because they signed a contract, and in the end, it all worked out. Everyone's happy. We got it done. So my point is, the contract saved me and is the only reason why that video exists. So very important. So also clarify everything you're doing. You could also do work for hire agreements. That's an option. So like, say I want to retain all my rights and I just want people to work for me but not have like credit for what I've done. So I can get them to sign a work for hire agreement, which specifies all this and just says, hey, makes it very clear this was done purely for like a payment, and you'll list like whatever payment. For me, it's like a penny, you know. They were, you know, signed this work for hire agreement. Like, you're hiring them, you're hiring their work. So then you get to keep your rights and property, your intellectual property, while simultaneously, you know, allowing other people to contribute and collaborate with you. So that's an option. Not saying you have to do that, but that's an option. And likewise, you know, maybe you've only, like, one guy in your group only contributed a little bit, so you can specify that this guy contributed roughly this amount. So, like, very important. I know it sounds kind of like annoying and weird to do, but trust me, if bad stuff happens, you'll really regret it not doing that. So it can save you a lot of trouble. So it's just something to seriously consider. Song. So now you've got your song, right? Song testing. And of course, if it's just a cappella, this may not apply. But if you've got like a mixed song you have ready, song testing. So you're going to want to test that song. If applicable, experience the song under various different contexts and devices. So if you're into music, you might already know about the car test. Okay, I had to do that. But so anyway, like, oftentimes what will happen is you'll be mixing a song, it'll sound great, you take it into your car, play it in the car, and it's horrible. It's so bassy you can't hear anything. It's like, wow. Maybe because I wasn't hearing all those frequencies properly, and because my studio wasn't set up, my listening environment wasn't set up correctly, so that I couldn't hear what I'm actually mixing and dealing with. So then that gets exposed when you're in a different listening environment, and all these frequencies pop out because they're no longer canceling themselves out, so you can actually hear them under a different context. Point being, I'll listen to my music through really terrible headphones, I'll listen to them through studio headphones, I'll listen to them in the car, I'll listen to them through a phone, I'll listen to them through my friend's mono speaker phone, you know? So that gives me a good idea of kind of like getting a good idea of the song under different contexts. That can be very helpful from a mixing standpoint, if this is applicable. Right, and then maybe record the song in some way. This could be like recording digitally or analog, like recording the audio signal itself, or you can just be as simple as recording what you're going to do on a piece of paper with like the lyrics and the sheet music and, you know, chords and all that. So basically, how are you going to not forget this? How are you going to keep it, you know, and have it be that way so you can, you know, re-experience it or do whatever someday. So that's another option. Recording if applicable. So then, now we move on to publishing. This is also optional. You could just make all your music and keep it all to yourself. That's cool. Or, you know, let's assume that you want to publish it. You don't want to just keep it to yourself. You want to share it with other people. Well, how do you do that? Well, you could take an amateur or a more professional approach. You could do the amateur thing, which is what I do with a lot of my music, and you just put it out on Bandcamp or SoundCloud or something like that. Find some platform, and then bloop. And a lot of them you can do it for free. So you just upload it and do everything. Bloop, now it's done. Yay, it's on the internet. Or put it on YouTube or whatever you want to do. You can do that. So that's very easy, kind of self-explanatory. You know, you can find tutorials how to do it, you know, whatever for each platform you need. Then there's the more professional standpoint. So like I said, you're going to, you know, want to legitimize or officialize it, you know, register copyright.gov, all that stuff. That's really helpful. Publishing the song. Maybe you're involved with a record label. Maybe you're trying to do your own self-release. You know, you've got independent artists who release everything on their own entirely. So, like I said, there's a lot of options in terms of publishing. You can even get involved with streaming services. I mean, you can do tangible, physical things like CDs, or if you even know what CDs are, you know, whatever is the newest thing now, you know, tangible thing, you know. So anyway, I feel like publishing is kind of self-explanatory, like, or at least publishing, going into the nitty-gritty of publishing isn't the purpose of this video, but those are just some things to think about. Then another aspect, which may or may not be applicable, promo, like promotion. Like, are you going to promote this? Are you just going to, you know, just not say anything at all and just let everyone come to you if they want to and not care if the word gets out about it or not? That's an option too. So you don't have to do any promo at all. Or if you are interested in promo, it's related to marketing. Okay, to sell is human. So like, don't think that you're above selling something. You're just taking something that you care about, presenting it to people, and then in a way that matches their needs, so you can create a win-win for everyone. So you don't think that marketing has to be this shady thing where you compromise some kind of moral value. No, it's just like learning how to convey your value appropriately. So look at it from that standpoint. Once again, this video is not about how to market, whatever. I've learned a lot about marketing from people like Owen Cook, who introduced me to like Dan Kennedy's. Like, there's so many great people who are way better at that than I am. So I'll just refer you to those people if you're interested in promo. Which there's many different like techniques or devices you can use, like release schedules. Like, so some people will like stagger their releases or have like teaser tracks, or in the past they used to have actual promo videos where it's kind of weird. But anyway, I don't know if that's relevant. But so there's that. So advertising, word of mouth. Maybe you don't want to do advertising, just word of mouth. I mean, that's an option too. So it really just depends, So that those are all different things to think about how you want to promote it, if applicable. And then, of course, aside from promo, maybe there's things that you can do with the song additionally afterwards, like making merch or something, like music videos. Perfect example. You can make a music video. Like, that's another thing that you can take that song and use it to make a new thing, or maybe merch relating to that, like t-shirts or whatever. Like, so that's a whole nother option. Stuff relating to the song that you can do afterwards. Yeah, and then finally we have the last thing, which I think is important. It's called reflection. So this is less about the song itself and just more about thinking about what just happened and analyzing it. That's important. And taking note of all the things that went great with your song and all the things that you don't like at all and wish you're like, man, I'm never doing that again, But so this is part of why it's important to finish songs, because if you never finish it, you never get to bite the bullet and really feel the consequences of your mistakes. So like, there have been times where like I release stuff and the mixing is atrocious, so bad, and then afterwards, man, I feel the pain for that years later. I'm just like, this mixing's terrible. Like, but because I owned that mistake and feel the consequences of that, I'm never going to do that again, because I know exactly what happens, and I don't want to repeat that mistake, that painful mistake again. Whereas if I just kept it to myself, then maybe I'm not making that mistake. I'm also not learning from it, and then I'm also not releasing anything or working on finishing stuff. So that's another thing to think about. So reflection is important, because you want to improve. You don't want to just make the same mistake and learn nothing. So you take lessons to learn so you can recalibrate yourself, so the next song you do next time you can do it better. You can be in a better position than you were before you made the song. And then finally, repeat. Do it again and again and again, as much as you want. It's free. So I feel like I've kind of explained, there you go, how to write a song, right? So there's a lot of what you're doing with. So now other points that I think are very important still. Very important. First of all, your skills will improve over time. So don't get discouraged by how difficult it is at first, if it is difficult. I'm just saying, it's very common for people to be frustrated with their art or whatever. So don't let dissatisfaction with what you're doing dissuade you from continuing to work on that skill, right? I'll tell you from my personal experience, I've been writing my first album for 10 years. So since 2014, I started playing guitar in 2009, so that took 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 5 years. So I was literally writing riffs for 5 years before, and this is just my personal journey. I'm not going to say you're going to take nearly as long as I did, because you're probably smarter than I am or better than I am, or whatever. You can, whatever. I went through, I had a particular situation. So anyway, 5 years. It took me 5 years before I was writing anything that I even liked. So, and I've rewritten all the songs on my first album so many times, like at least 3 times, because it's like, I just don't like it. I'm doing a top-down approach, so like I want everything to be at a certain standard, and I simply don't have the skills to write riffs that I enjoy. So that kind of sucks. I know how that feels. But that being said, I just kept working on it. Now, I literally write riffs that I love like this. Like, I have too many now. Now I'm so good at it, it takes so little effort, I have too much. So now it's like, now it's a new problem where I'm so overwhelmed by all this great stuff I've made that realistically, I'm not going to release all of it. So I'm just like, now I have to choose. That's hard. Like, so now that's a lot better problem to have, personally. So anyway, there's that. So like, my point is, all of these things I'm mentioning, if they're hard, these are skills, so you get better. So realize, have faith, as they say, that you will get better. This will become easier. So now over time, I release an EP every month. I can release 2 or even 3 EPs a month if I want to. Like, that's how much better I am now. It used to take me like months just to write one song. Now I can write one in a day if I really want to, you know. So your skills will improve. So don't let the fact that you're dissatisfied with certain things dissuade you. Just understand that's part of the process. And that's beautiful. And understand, once you get to a great place like that, you're never gonna like go back to those early struggle days ever again. So like, try and find the value in that somewhat. Like, you know, so that's what I'm saying. It's the process. If you love the process, then it's all enjoyable. You know, it's the striving to get better and better and better, and it never ends. Like, that's the enjoyment. That's what I like about it. So that's another thing. You will improve, and if you never give up, you will eventually find it easy to write things that you're deeply satisfied with. So, there you go. Another very important point to mention, perfectionism. This is a huge problem for artists, and you need to make sure that this isn't going to stop you from doing what you need to do. Okay? Because no art you make will ever be perfect. Okay? So if you're trying to live up to literally an impossible standard, you're self-defeating yourself. You're setting yourself up to fail. And you know it's deep down, you know it's going to fail. So then you're going to procrastinate because you know it kind of is like an act of like self-aggression or defiance, because you know you really can't do it, and you kind of feel intuitively that's kind of unfair, but you know you're going to try anyway, and then, oh, see, I knew it was bad. It's just this mess. So then you never release anything because it's never going to be perfect, and then you just waste all this time. It's like, don't fall into that trap. Realize it will never be perfect, okay? And we'll balance it with the other side in a second. But one point is just, it will never be perfect. So accept imperfection. Accept that it will never be perfect. Accept the imperfection. Accept that it won't be good enough, you know, on some level. And that's okay. That's what you want. That is the only possible outcome you can have. So love it. Accept it. Accept its flaws and imperfections. Why? Because there's something really beautiful about music that doesn't apply in a lot of ways. Is that, and to other things, is that intent is more important than execution. So imagine any other context where this would apply. Like, imagine a surgeon who just like, where their intent was more important than execution. Like, well, I wanted to save this guy's life, but I just couldn't. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. You still couldn't do it. So it's like, you know, what if you're a baseball player? You're like, man, I wish I could hit the ball. I really want to. I have a great fantasy about how the ball will get a home run and all that, but I just didn't. It's like, well, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, in those contexts, execution, you can argue, is more important than intent. But music, it's flipped. So it doesn't matter how good you are. If you have a great idea, that's the only thing that matters. So the intent, what you're trying to do, is more important. It's the vision you have. That's where the value is. It's not in how good you are at translating that vision into reality, because it'll never be perfect. Which leads me to another point. Back to the perfectionism thing. Beware that you can, especially nowadays with all the new tools and settings and options and plugins and blah, 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 blah. It never ends, okay? Beware that you can literally tweak things until the day you die without ever doing anything, okay? So that's an option. Don't get lost in the sauce in that way. Don't get lost in all the minutia so that you don't see the bigger picture. Like, realize what you're doing. Accept imperfection and truly love it for what it is. Okay? That's my advice. On the other hand, you don't want to just say, oh, I can just make crap music that I hate, and because it's imperfect, yeah, like, no. Have some, like, baseline level standards. You know, you want to make sure you like it. Why write songs you don't even like? So, like, obviously, you want to balance that with, yeah, you don't want to, like, just regret everything you've done, you know. So have some kind of baseline standard so that, you know, you're glad you did it. That's kind of the whole point, right? So you don't just release junk you don't even like with your name on it. So that all being said, your tastes may change over time. many people hate their songs in hindsight. They're just like, oh God, I can't believe I liked that, you know? Which means your tastes are evolving, which that might be a great thing. Some people like what they did forever, and I never have any. Some people just always hate them, like always hate their songs, like, and it doesn't get better, okay? And some people hate their songs, but then like them in hindsight, so. I think the worst option is probably just hating it forever and like having never liked it at all and never learning to like it. So like maybe avoid that situation. But all the other ones, like, who cares? It's kind of just, I just think they're kind of interesting, like, you know. So I believe I've gone through everything. But once again, it's intent is more important than execution. Like, so for example, like I'm very dissatisfied with my mixing setup currently, so I just realized, well, it's better for me to just make the music anyway. And if I really like something in hindsight, I can always go back and redo it and make it better with a better mix. So it's like not to tie myself down. I can't do anything until I can do it in the perfect way. Like, now that I've let go of that, I can just make music like that because that doesn't hold me back. So that's another thing to think about. So yes, so so this is relevant to what I just talked about. It's realize what we're doing. What are we doing with art? Like, why will it never be perfect? Because realize what we're doing with art. We're taking the infinite power of the imagination and condensing it down into this finite, limited, tangible object. So that's a translation ability, okay? So you're never gonna you can't just put your imagination into someone else. Maybe someday we could, and that would just be life-changing and crazy, but like we can't do that now. You can't jump into my head and see my vision for this song. All I can do is translate it the best I can. The same thing we do with language. You know, we don't speak perfectly. We just try and translate our thoughts into words, English words, so we can kind of get at least a general picture of what we're going for and communicate that. So we're doing the same thing with music and art. So that's why it can't ever be perfect. You got to accept imperfection on some level, because you're taking the infinite power of the imagination and reducing or condensing or at least translating it into a tangible object. So that's why it'll never be perfect, and you should manage any perfectionism that you run into with that. So I think I've gone over pretty much everything, which is super cool. So hope you've gained a lot from this video. Hope I've given you stuff to think about. If you have any questions, let me know. Ways I can improve the video, maybe things I've missed. Surely I've missed a lot, okay? But my whole point is hopefully I've created enough of a picture for you to like kind of like feel confident about, learn like how this whole process works, things you can do, and like how to actually do it. So yeah, I don't think there's much more to talk about. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it. I'm so glad I can provide this value so that you don't have to go through everything I went through and spend 10 years and all this stuff and, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, and like only to come up with nothing, and then to have to think about, well, what do I really wish someone would have told me, and then to come up with this whole video. And then I can just take all this and just, yeah, here you go. Here's what I wish I knew. So there you go. You are welcome. Hope you appreciate it. Happy creating. Enjoy yourself. And I can't wait to see what you come up with. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. See you later.